Okay, let's take a look at some of the input values for the Aurora trading system. Some of you are going to find this particularly interesting if you're going to try to figure out how the system is working behind the scenes. Based on some of these inputs, you're going to get some decent clues, so some of you are going to want to pay particular attention here. First input is the number of contracts. This is the number of contracts we're going to trade per signal. So this is our static method of position sizing. Second input is the number of throttle contracts. If you'll remember, Aurora uses 3 different setups to determine if it should enter a trade at the close of the day. If all 3 of these signals trigger on the same day, we consider this a very high probability trade. And what we allow users to do is to trade more contracts that day. And what we call that as an input is the throttle contracts. Let me demonstrate this. Let's just put 1 contract here and 0 contracts for the throttle. By putting 0 for the throttle, what that means is we're always just going to trade 1. We don't care if we're going to get all 3 signals, 2 signals, or 1 signal. We're just going to trade 1 contract. And let's see what this generates. Okay, here's our performance report. This is from 1997 to the end of the first half of 2011. We have a net profit of $21,000, profit factor of 1.9, 127 trades, and $170 per trade. Now what we'll do is, let's go to our inputs, and instead of trading 1 contract when we get a throttle signal, we're just going to bump this up to 2 and see what this does. I'm going to pause the video while this computes. Okay, and so we bring this up to $26,000, 2.05 profit factor, and we go from $170 to $205 per trade. Notice we're trading the same number of setups, 127. So that's what the throttle does. We're able to trade in that extra share, or that extra contract when those high probability setups take place. Those take place only about once a year, so they don't happen very often, but our backtesting shows that they are extremely reliable signals. Let's continue with the other inputs. Okay, I just put our throttle back to 0. Stop loss, self-explanatory. We have a $500 stop loss. That's in dollars per contract. We have a trailing amount of $1,100 just to help lock in some of those profits. Entries per day, we're going to limit that to 1. What this prevents the system from doing is re-entering the market if it gets stopped out, which can happen, but if we get stopped out, we want to consider that the market is continuing to move down and we're not going to attempt to re-enter. 1 trade per signal, so we're going to limit that to 1. Our next inputs, particularly the percent risk model, the starting equity, and the percent risk, are all related. What this allows us to do, enable percent risk model, if we put this to true, we're going to start trading the number of contracts based on our percent risk and our account size. So what this is, this allows us to dynamically position our trading. And I guess the best way to demonstrate this, well, first of all, if you're not familiar with the percent risk model, it's a little bit beyond what I want to get into, but please go online and Google percent risk model or percent risk, and that will explain in greater detail of what we're doing. Essentially what we're going to do is risk 2%, that's how this says set up with this 2 here, percent of our equity per trade. So let me demonstrate what this looks like. We saw already what we were doing with a single contract where we had $21,000 in profit and $170 per trade. What would happen with the percent risk model? Let's enable this and take a look. Alright, the first thing what we want to do is we're going to set our starting equity to $25,000, and we're going to risk 2% of that per trade. Let's enable our percent risk model. Type this in here, true, and let this go. Now what will happen is, because we enabled this, it's going to ignore the static number of contracts and the throttle contracts up here. This also brings up another good point is we have our percent risk throttle. This was set to 4. Let's start out with 0. So what this is saying is, once again, when we get our throttle type signal, we're not going to increase our risk. We're going to risk 2% per trade for all trades equally. Let's start with that and see what it looks like. Once again, our static one contract per setup, we had $170 per trade, making $21,688. Let's start this. I'm going to pause the video while this computes. Okay. By reinvesting our profits and using the percent risk model, we bring our system up to $31,000 in profit. Profit factor actually goes up a little bit too, to 2.05, and our net profit per trade, our average net profit per trade, goes to $247. Of course, we have the same number of trades and the same win rate. So that's the percent risk model. Now, once again, let me bring up the inputs. Just like with our static setup here, when we want to throttle our number of contracts, we can do the same thing when we have our percent risk model enabled. What we can do is go to our percent risk throttle, and let's double that. Let's put that to a 4. So when we have a setup that we believe is a high probability setup where all 3 setups are saying go long, instead of risking 2%, we're going to go out on a limb and risk 4% of our equity on that given trade. So let's go take a look at that. And I'll pause the video. Okay, let's bring it over. So we go from $31,000 to just under $39,000. Our profit factor is 2.01, and our average trade net profit goes to around $307 per trade. Okay, let's continue the rest of the inputs. Our next inputs, we have RSI buy level, RSI accumulation buy level, and our trend buy level. These are parameters used by our 3 different setups. So this is, the first one is based on our RSI setup. The next one is RSI accumulation setup, and trend buy level setup for the last one. What these numbers indicate is essentially how deep does the pullback need to be on the daily chart. The lower the number here, the more restrictive we are going to be. In other words, the deeper that pullback needs to be on the daily chart. The input values are explained in more detail in the user manual, and for those of you who are trying to figure out how the system works, these are key values that I've explained in other videos, so you can figure out what's going on. Our last input is we're able to send our data as we generate trades to a file on our system. So this is enabled, and what this is going to do is after each trade is completed and closed out, the information is sent to your hard drive as a .csv file, which is compatible with Excel. Let's go take a look at what this file looks like. Okay, I found the file on our hard drive, and this is what it looks like. I open this up in Microsoft Excel, and it has the trade number, the date, the time of the trade, the profit and loss for that given trade. The risk is the amount that we have as our stop value, the volatility measured in dollars at the time of the trade, and we have MAE, which is our maximum adverse excursion. In other words, how much heat did we take on the trade, and our maximum favorable excursion, how much did the trade move in our favor during the open position. So this is loaded into a spreadsheet, and why would you want to do this? Well, you can build equity graphs out of this. You can analyze the volatility. You can load it into a Monte Carlo type simulator to analyze this further, and that's actually what I do here as well to help determine some other statistics on the trading system. So this is another feature that's available.